Today, I plan to talk about a difficult subject. Something that in our society is, for a lack of a better word, taboo. A sort of sickness that has silently killed millions, yet is very rarely talked about. This speech is an awareness speech. Something I hope will help others see the problem we face with more clarity. The subject that I have been alluding to is suicide. Suicide is defined as the act of taking one's own life through various ways, which I will not go into detail on. In an article by Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, they state, in 2017, nearly 38,000 persons of working age, which is 16 to 64 years, in the United States died by suicide, which represents a 40% rate increase from 2000 to 2017 in less than 2 decades. An increase this high would surely call for a more detailed look at what could be causing such a rise in death rates to suicide. Suicide typically comes from depression, which is defined as a feeling of severe despondency and dejection. Depression can target a certain demographic of people. However, it is extremely hard to diagnose depression in a person. Anybody can have it, yet show no signs even to people who are extremely close to the person affected with this terrible disease of the mind. It is common to hear someone say, after the person has taken their own life, they were always so happy. Robin Williams, one of the seemingly most happy people on earth, once said, I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make other people happy, because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and don't want anyone else to feel like that. Robin Williams was arguably one of the funniest comedians who ever lived, yet he took his own life in 2014. How can someone who always seemed so happy feel so extremely alone and miserable? In a commencement speech given at Kenyon College in 2005, David Foster Wallace said these words, learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. Because if you cannot exercise this kind of choice in adult life, you will be totally hosed. Think of the old cliche about, quote, the mind being an excellent servant but a terrible master. This, like many cliches, so lame and unexciting on the surface, actually exposes a great and terrible truth. It is not the least bit coincidental that adults who commit suicide with firearms almost always shoot themselves in the head. They shoot the terrible master, and the truth is that most of these suicides are actually dead long before they pull the trigger. David, like Mr. Williams, also suffered from severe depression in some form of cruel irony. And in some form of cruel irony, he would also take his own life a few years after this speech in 2008. In the aftermath of Robin's suicide, many had no idea how depressed the actor and comedian really was. However, David had struggled with depression rather openly and had been admitted to a hospital on several occasions and went through rehab several times. It is interesting to note how differently these two people dealt with the same disease. I use these two examples because they are both fairly well-known people. However, there are hundreds of thousands of people all over the world with depression. I hope these two people's stories aid me in getting my points across. This disease doesn't care who you are, how much money you have, or what your social status is. There are several different types of depression. The one I will be mainly talking about for the length of this paper will be major depressive disorder, or MDD. In an article titled Italian Psychiatrist's Perception on Cognitive Symptoms In major depressive disorder, the author states, major depressive disorder, MDD, is a common mental disorder often associated with deficits in cognitive function, and the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorder, 5th edition, lists impaired cognition, i.e., diminished ability to think or concentrate, or indecisiveness, a criterion item in diagnosis of a major depressive episode. MDD has been shown to affect cognitive domains of attention, concentration, and memory. Unfortunately, academic papers have a way of sucking the life out of any subject. As you can clearly see from the sample above, they take the humanity right out of the subject, leaving cold, mundane facts behind, which work well if all you want to do is relay information. However, I want people to feel the impact that this disease has on others. It's not enough to simply know something. You must feel it to care about it. In a TED Talk titled The Bridge Between Suicide and Life, Kevin Briggs relays his experience with the subject in a very articulated way. He states, I recently retired from the California Highway Patrol after 23 years of service. The majority of those 23 years were spent patrolling the southern end of Marin County, which includes the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge is an iconic structure known worldwide for its beautiful views of San Francisco, the Pacific, and its inspiring architecture. Unfortunately, it is also a magnet for suicide, being one of the most utilized sites in the world. The Golden Gate Bridge opened in 1937. Joseph Strauss, the chief engineer in charge of building the bridge, was quoted as saying, "The bridge is practically suicide-proof. Suicide from the bridge is neither practical nor probable." But since its opening, over 1,600 people have leapt to their death from that bridge. I can tell you from experience that once the person is on that cord and at their darkest time, it is very difficult to get them back. When I first began working on the bridge, we had no formal training. You struggled to funnel your way through these calls. This was not only a disservice to those contemplating suicide, but to the officers as well. Now, veteran officers and psychologists train new officers. Briggs then relays the saddest part of the speech by showing a picture of one Jason Garber saying, "I met Jason on July 22nd of last year, when I received a call of a possible suicide subject sitting on the cord near mid-span. I responded, and when I arrived, I observed Jason speaking to a Golden Gate Bridge officer. Jason was just 32 years old and had flown out from New Jersey. As a matter of fact, he had flown out here on 2 other occasions from New Jersey to attempt suicide on this bridge. After about an hour of speaking with Jason, he asked us if we knew the story of Pandora's box. Recalling your Greek mythology, Zeus created Pandora and sent her down to earth with a box and told her never ever open that box. Well, one day, curiosity got the better of Pandora, and she did open the box. Out flew plagues, sorrows, and all sorts of evil against man. The only good thing in the box was hope. Jason then asked us, what happens when you open the box and hope isn't in there? He paused for a few moments, leaned to his right, and was gone. In Briggs' speech, it is obvious how difficult it is to relay this story. How much it pains him that he couldn't save Jason. The thing that most people who commit suicide don't realize is what they leave behind. The people that are hurt from what they have done to themselves. I remember when I was playing sports, we had left for a track meet early in the morning. We stopped at a gas station at the halfway point when our coach got a call along with several other people on our team. They had just found a boy from our high school who had committed suicide. I remember playing basketball with him. He was several years ahead of me. That year would have been his senior year. To me, he showed no signs of being depressed, and everyone in our high school liked and respected him. I knew one of his closest friends fairly well and saw firsthand what it did to him, what it did to everyone. Suicide does not just affect the person that commits it. If anyone says that, they're lying to themselves. Suicide affects everyone you know in a negative way. It hurts everyone you ever knew in one fell swoop. These are just a few of many countless stories. Most people know someone, either directly or indirectly, who has committed suicide. I ask you to imagine living with a brain that wants to die, but a body that's programmed to survive. Having to live day in and day out inside their own head. Feeling hopelessly and helplessly alone, with those horrible thoughts ever at the front of their mind. I posit to you that no one wants to commit suicide. They just want the pain that haunts them inside their own head constantly to stop. Unfortunately, treatment for depression is very hit and miss at this time, and there are many debates on how serious the symptoms must be before treatment should take place. In a research article titled, "What is the threshold for clinically relevant effect? The case of major depressive disorders," the writers state, despite hundreds of randomized controlled trials on antidepressant medications, psychotherapies, and several other types of treatment, we still have no proper way of determining whether a treatment's effects are clinically relevant. In 2004, this issue was placed in the limelight of scientific attention when the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, NICE, proposed that a standardized mean difference, SMD, or Cohen's d, of 0.50 represents a clinically relevant effect. Treatments with smaller effects were deemed to be clinically irrelevant. This resulted in several highly cited studies which announce that antidepressant medication does not have a clinically relevant effect in mild to moderate depression because the SMD was below the cutoff SMD equals 0.50. NIC abandoned this position in 2009. This position in 2009 guideline. But this went apparently unnoticed, given that the 2004 cutoff has received considerable attention in the media and scholarly journal articles. As you can plainly tell from the article above, we still have a long way to go before we can fully understand this disease, or the most effective way to treat it. Medication for depression has the potential to help, although for some, the side effects can be severe. After being on medication for depression, it can be very difficult to stop taking the medication. Some people even experience worsening symptoms of depression after quitting the medication. In my unprofessional opinion, doctors should not simply prescribe the drug that will help with symptoms short term, but rather use the medication as a means of helping the person at the time while also searching for better means to control these symptoms. Helping the person get to the other side should always be the priority, not simply getting them by. That having been said, this is a disease that we don't fully understand, and as of yet, treatments remain hit and miss. According to the World Health Organization, one person dies from suicide every 40 seconds. And suicide was the second leading cause of death amongst people ages 15 to 29. However, these are just statistics on paper. They carry little meaning to us. But when we make these people, and not just numbers on a page, when we realize the loss their families suffered it becomes meaningful. The youngest suicide recorded was only 6 years old. This is unacceptable. Something must be done. Young children are dying. We must take action against this disease. It kills far too many men, women, and children. One thing that we can all do is be a little more aware. And if you see someone that you believe may be contemplating taking their own life, a simple way to ask them is, others in situations similar to yours have contemplated taking their own life. Have you ever had these types of thoughts? If we stand together and work together, we can and will beat suicide. So I ask you, with sincerity, check in on your friends, your family members, your co-workers. We have already lost millions. Don't take a chance at losing even one more. Thank you for your time.